All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Today we're going to talk about content strategy. And here's the truth. The majority of marketers fail at content marketing. Don't believe us? Data shows us the overwhelming amount of companies openly admit that their content marketing is not meeting their expectations. That's why we're here today, to learn the do's and don'ts of content marketing and how content strategy is the foundation for successful content marketing. Before I introduce our speakers today, a quick heads up that we're recording today's presentation, and we will email all of you a link to the recording after the event. You'll also notice that there's a chat area in the screen. Please feel free to send questions and comments throughout the presentation, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go. Back to our topic today, how to set yourself up for content marketing success. We'll learn this from Chrissy Reimer and Kristen Besser, excuse me. We talked about this earlier. Two outstanding content strategists who spend their days helping brands reach their content marketing goals. I'm excited to learn more from them and hope you are too. So here's Chrissy and Kristen.
All right, so Chrissy here. So the reason that we're here today is this stat is a perfect example of why we're here today. So the source here is the Content Marketing Institute. It's from their annual research, which found that 9 out of 10 businesses, they say that they're doing content marketing, but their success rate is only about 30%. So let's say you had a different profession, like you could say, I do coffee pouring, but I only have a 30% success rate. Or I do taxes, but I only have a 30% success rate. Or I do firefighting, but I only have a 30% success rate. That would be terrible. You would definitely get fired from your job if you were only having a 30% success rate at those tasks. So why should we settle for that number? So we're here today to talk about how we can do better and the ways that we can do that when it comes to content strategy and content marketing. So our agenda for today, we're going to talk through some definitions. Kristen will talk through that. Then some different myths that people or that have come up in the world of content strategy and content marketing, how to get started, and then also ways to measure success so that you know what you're doing is worthwhile.
All right, so we'll start at the most basic level. What is content? We're just going to lay some groundwork here through a series of quick definitions, as Chrissy mentioned. So the reason that this topic is near and dear to us and to you on the phone, content is at the heart of what we do. Moz has a great definition of content that we like to use. As marketers, we talk to customers, we talk to clients, and we communicate with our readers. That's our job. And regardless of what form that communication takes, that's content. So you'll hear the debates about, is content king or queen? Is it context? Is it distribution? Is it SEO? So that's what we'll clear up in this upfront section of our webinar today. So is content having a blog? If you have a blog, are you doing content marketing? It can be. Every word you read on a website, though, and every image that you would see on that site is also a piece of content. Is content having an email newsletter? Definitely could be. It's also every email that you get in your inbox. It can be video content. It can be on your site, YouTube, Vimeo, really any channel. And your content can be as tiny as a tweet. Essentially, anything you produce that speaks to an end user is a piece of content. This webinar is a piece of content. Ian Laurie from Portent has a great quote about content isn't stuff we write to rank higher, it's not a bunch of infographics, and it's not a slew of long-form articles. It's communicating to an audience in any way. Great, so not rocket science. Not why you're here, perfect. We'll talk about why content is important. We've all come to an understanding content is how you communicate with your customers. Great. Not to go marriage counseling on you, but communication is key in any successful relationship. So how do you communicate in ways that are going to be beneficial to your business? You have to cut through the clutter. We all know this. Customers are inundated with information at this day and age. The days of information scarcity are long gone. It's really difficult to make a decision. And you've probably heard that people have the average attention span of a goldfish. So what do you do in this crowded, complicated space? How do you win? You really just need crazy focus. And you find that through great content. Solve your customers' problems. Be relevant. Make your customers happy. The happier they are, the better that they're set up to make a decision, and ultimately a decision that's favorable to your business. Great. So our content strategy and content marketing, the same thing. Is it the silver bullet? Sort of. Clear definitions are the way to get to smart collaboration. So a couple of key reasons that we find definitions to be a critical place to start. Helps everyone speak the same language, both internally at your organization and externally with any partners, vendors, or contractors that you're managing. So whether you're performing these services, sourcing them, or selling them, you need to measure and optimize them and structure your teams to succeed by having this common understanding first. So what is content strategy? You're probably familiar with Christina Halverson's definition, which is not on this slide. Planning for the creation, delivery, and governance of useful, usable content. We totally agree. Also, that's not super specific. So we prefer this definition from Sally Bagshaw. Think about a content strategist as a business analyst. Think about how your content is helping or hindering your business and make a plan to make it work better. In a nutshell, that's your content strategy. So in contrast, what is content marketing? How is that different? So here we like to use Joe Polizzi's definition. He's the founder of the Content Marketing Institute that Chrissy mentioned a few moments ago, where that stat came from about that 30% success rate. Content marketing is where you create valuable, compelling, and relevant content, you build an audience, and you see profitable customer action. So keep in mind, what makes a customer action profitable doesn't always mean dollar signs. It really depends on your strategy. It could be engagement, awareness, a number of things, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So that's essentially where we go full circle. So what is profit? That depends on your strategy. You have to have a strategy in order to drive profit. So where should I focus? Spoiler alert, both. Sometimes we found it helps to oversimplify, so we'll go through a quick cheat sheet to draw some nice contrasts between the two, and then we'll get into some mythbusters. So content strategy plans, content marketing executes. Content strategy manages, content marketing produces. Content isn't a project. You don't set it and forget it. Content is truly a product. And it's created and should be maintained with a purpose in mind, otherwise it rots. And you've probably heard the acronym ROT, redundant, outdated, trivial. A content strategy will help you govern what you produce so that you don't get into those situations. An example recently of a trivial piece of content, our mailbox is flooded with cards from real estate agents with recipes, even from the agents that just sold us our house. That's a waste of effort. You know, they know that we've purchased this house, and recipes really have nothing to do with their business as real estate agents. So if they had a solid content strategy in place, they would probably be targeting us more for referrals than anything else. Content strategy guides, content marketing delivers. If you only do a content strategy, you're going to aim, aim, aim. If you only do content marketing, you're just firing, firing, firing. You really need to have them working hand in hand so that you're aiming, firing, and delivering. So in summary, content strategy, it's having something to say that's worth saying. Content marketing is where you're saying it. Content strategy, know what your audience is ordering. Content marketing, serve it up and get results. And now for the 3D version of Mythbusters.
I didn't watch the show enough to know actually any like good references here. But we're here today to do some myth busting. When it comes to content strategy, content marketing, we've heard a lot of different just rumors and myths, and you know, rumors are never good, so we're here to squish some of those right away. So the first myth, is this just another marketing trend? Am I gonna look like that jerk wearing a Google Glass at the latest conference? Am I going to have a creepy Furby on my shelf? Like, I don't need that. So no, this is not just another marketing trend. As you can see, this is Google Trends for content strategy and content marketing. Content marketing is in the red there. So content strategy has been pretty steady over time. Content marketing, as you can see over the past few years, has really been increasing. And I think the reason that this could be is content strategy takes a long time and it requires a lot of effort versus content marketing, which is more executionally based. So I think in the past few years, people have really been pulling that trigger and really creating content without much of a strategy in mind. Not to give marriage counseling again, but I think of this as any romantic comedy. There's always the fun, new, interesting person that they go on a date with, and then they always end up with the person that's been pursuing them the longest time. So stay in it for the long game. But I think that's where content strategy has been more consistent. Content marketing has really been on the increase. So looking at the Gartner Hype Circle in relation to content strategy. So this is representing the idea that, this was the shiny new object. Content strategy, we've been hearing it for the past few years. People have been really excited about it, so have we. But it came to this place where people had really high expectations for it, thinking it was, this is the answer to all things, but not necessarily taking the time to create that strategy behind it. So we're here in this trough of disillusionment, slowly getting towards that plateau of productivity, which is where we're trying to head, trying to create more repeatable processes and just working smarter so that we're not being that 30% success rate. We want, closer to 100% success rate. And we're not just saying this because this is our job. I mean, while we love to preach the gospel of content strategy, other people are also behind us on this. According to a Forrester Wave survey on Ad Age, 90% of the respondents plan to increase their content marketing budgets, and that 10% that's planning to decrease budgets fell from 23% in the past. So people are definitely putting their money where their mouth is and have an interest in content strategy because they see that this is where things are headed. So boom, it's false. It's not just another marketing trend. Myth number 2. Okay, so you'll just want us to make like 15 videos and start a blog and, hire 15 copywriters to get going on this. No, so actually a lot of where we start in our content strategy practices here at 3Deep, we first start by taking a look at what currently exists and what the actual landscape is. So the first step in that is figuring out who your audience is, what their buying process is, what steps they take in making a purchase similar to your products, for your products. And then ultimately, does your content map to that? Does it map to what that user needs and the steps that they're taking in that process? So again, step 1, take a look at what you have. Depending on what your specific project is, you could, pull everything on your site and take a look at all of your web pages or all of your emails, or it could, really expand and be every piece of marketing content, every asset that you have. So taking a look at what you have, and then based on different sets of criteria, identifying what should be phased out, what should be revamped. So focusing on optimization and continuous improvement, looking at what's performing, how it's performing, is it worth keeping, but maybe just tweaking a little bit. And then what needs to be created? What are the gaps that you're seeing in what you have to offer? So the way that we do that here at 3Deep is a content inventory and audit process. So again, this looks like a lot of information, really exciting. So we pull, all of the available content assets and then take a look at a different number of criteria to determine if it's worth keeping. And the right criteria depends on your project and your goals. So criteria can differ depending on what your specific goals are. A place that we look to for criteria, it's a really great resource, is a heuristics checklist, which is, I think we'll share this link out after. So it's just a really great list of different criteria. And again, depending on your project and your goals, you can take a look at that. So once you have all of this information, then you're able to see where there are gaps and what types of information you should get rid of. So this is false. Actually, a really good place to start when it comes to content strategy is not creating anything at all, but really managing what currently exists and not just scrapping everything. Okay, so you're probably thinking, this sounds really expensive. This sounds like a lot of time and effort and work. So here's a little analogy. So if you fail to develop a content strategy and fail to really understand your user, you'll find yourself trying to feed a 5-year-old a steak, when really that 5-year-old wanted a grilled cheese. So you spent all this time and all this money investing and creating and making this steak so that it's really awesome, but it's just going to sit out on a table, on a plate, and get cold. And then your customer is going to go elsewhere and find exactly what they're looking for. So investing in a content strategy, yes, it's an investment, but it will help prevent a lot of wasted time, effort, and ultimately a lot of money. If you know who your customer is and what specifically they want and need and what they prefer, that will help you spend your time, effort, and money much more wisely. So the way that we accomplish that, we use customer journey maps as a way to combat that issue. So on the left, it's really small, but what this particular piece is accomplishing is understanding the specific steps that the user takes. So first, understanding who the user is, your target audience, then understanding the specific steps they take. The most common steps we use are awareness, consideration, purchase, post-purchase, and then understanding what that person is thinking, feeling, and specifically what they're doing, what actions they're taking throughout that buying process. So mapping that out really helps you figure out how to make the most useful content. And then this map on the right is really just a distilled version of that, and it's something that we use to really make it actionable, help us determine, okay, maybe we need an email here or specific web content to this particular piece of the journey map. So no, ultimately it's going to save you money and time to take the time to actually create a content strategy and then execute based on that. Awesome, great. Myths busted.
There were way less explosions in that version of Mythbusters than what I'm used to. All right, so where do I start? How do I make this practical? Sounds great in theory. This is our content strategy methodology at 3Deep. You may have seen something similar to this. I'll just walk you through it at a high level what these phases accomplish, and I'll nod to a couple of tools that help get us there. So before you dig into your audience, you really need to know yourself. So who is your brand and what are your business priorities? What results do you need? That happens in a myriad of ways, but essentially you need to land on what are your measurable goals and are all critical stakeholders in alignment. From there you can proceed to your audience. So who is your target audience? And typically we're more interested in segments than we are personas, particularly less interested in demographics unless those are really driving some critical behaviors or other distinctive traits that we can activate against, and really much more interested in what's important to your audience. Who are they? What do they need? Then we can start assessing marketplace opportunity. So how are these audiences making decisions, or how are they trying to if they're not succeeding? What are their other options? And from there, we can do an analysis for how your content can help you meet those goals for your audience and your business. Find those places of mutual benefit. And as Chrissy mentioned, the place that we start in that content analysis phase is with some form of an inventory and audit, supplemented with analysis, whether it's from Google Analytics, social analytics, whatever platform is most relevant to the property that you're evaluating. And then we move into getting some focus. So this discovery phase is really getting the lay of the land, what could be. Then we tighten up into what should be. And that happens in 2 phases. What could you do? What should you have? So a gap analysis is performed at this point, and ultimately you will receive a prioritized set of recommendations, which is the content plan. Now we know what we could do. Now we know what we should do. We go into execution mode. So revise, reduce, create in that order of priority. As Chrissy mentioned, it's almost always the case that revisions and optimization and a reduction in what you have is going to get you most of the way there before you need to worry about creation. People tend to reverse that order and focus on the creation. More is not always better. Focus on closing those gaps. So we think about that in 3 ways. How should it be organized? And that's driven by a taxonomy and a sitemap, assuming that your project is site-based. What should it say? We accomplish through a messaging strategy, which we deliver in the format of page tables. And then how do you say it? And this is where experience design, creative design, and copywriting really come into play, and in many cases content curation, back to that point about using what you already have. So once you've executed, then we go into iteration mode. So a strong content strategy gives you the tools to prioritize and focus your efforts for continuous improvement. So what's working, what's not, and act on it. Content isn't set it and forget it, and neither is a content strategy. So your content strategy will help you govern what you create and what you have. Also can inform your test plans and optimization efforts. So a couple of tools to refer your way. There are many, many resources out there. We're just going to highlight a couple of our favorites. So the Content Strategy Toolkit by Megan Casey is a great practical resource that walks you through the tricks of the trade. Megan Casey's from Brain Traffic. She's a speaker at content strategy events like Confab here in Minneapolis. And this book comes with a zip file that you can download that's full of every tool and template that she discusses in the book. So it's available for you to kind of customize and adapt to best suit your needs versus starting from scratch or reinventing the wheel. So that's a valuable resource. Also, we love the epic list of content strategy resources. That's a blog post from Jonathan Coleman. He is a well-known keynote speaker. He's a UX and content strategist at Facebook, and there are hundreds upon hundreds of resources in his epic list, ranging from books to blogs to articles and forums. We'll also be providing a couple of hand-selected blog posts from 3Deep that will help get you started on defining measurement for your organization and your project, and how to get a great understanding of your audience and some practical ways to apply that understanding.
Okay, cool. That was really great. So now you know how to be rock star content strategists. But how do you prove that you are successful? How will you know if you're successful in your content strategy efforts? So you want to be able to prove to your boss that you made an awesome, brilliant, super heroic move by investing in content strategy. How do you do that? So a tool that we often use is actually from that toolkit that Kristen was just mentioning. So again, that was by Megan Casey, Content Strategy Toolkit. So this is a bit of a Mad Lib, so taking you back to your youth, which is always fun. So this is something that we follow to help us identify how to actually measure success. So blank project, insert project here, helps our company accomplish these particular goals, specific goals, by providing these things that makes the audience feel a particular way so that they can do this. So here's an example of how this could be filled out. So ABC's Thought Leadership blog helps our company accomplish a 20% increase in overall web visits and 20+ web leads per month by providing innovative and expert content that makes busy, detail-oriented engineers feel confident and/or excited so that they can get a quote or recommend the company to their boss. So what's great about this is it really helps paint a really specific picture of what you're trying to accomplish with a particular piece of content. So you want to be able to map specific elements on each page to measurable metrics. What's important about this is that when you stop to actually think about why you're doing something and who you're doing it for, it helps the team that's working on it really align and also provides clarity from the very beginning of a project. It can also help to get rid of any irrelevant ideas. So if it turns out that this doesn't actually map to a business goal, what you're looking to create, then you probably shouldn't spend a lot of time and money working on that particular piece of content. Ultimately, a good content strategy should make it really easy to justify a solid no to someone. If somebody is just asking for a spin-off piece of content, run it up against the Mad Lib exercise, and if it doesn't match up to that, then it's probably not a great fit for what you're trying to accomplish. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of confidence to understand what content strategy is, what content marketing is, and gives you a little hope that, yeah, you can totally do that, or someone on your team can do that. So just a review of what we talked about today, just to give a really high-level overview. Content marketing will fail without a content strategy. So in other words, executing content, creating content without a very clear strategy is not going to be successful. You're gonna become part of that statistic, and you're going to fail 30% of the time, or have success less. Producing content without a content strategy is going to waste time, and it's going to waste money, which is really important in a world where we're all trying to get the most bang for our buck. Before you start creating content, you want to make sure that you're identifying your goals and objectives, your audience, and understanding the user journey so that you can align your content to those pieces. Also, always measure your results to show your boss how awesome you are, and also to learn from your efforts, to learn and optimize where it's necessary. Maybe something's not working so great, so you want to try something a little different, or maybe it's working really well, so you want to also learn from that and apply that in other places. So ultimately, let's do this thing and let's do it better. So I think now we'll start fielding some questions. So if you have questions, be sure to type them into that question box. Otherwise, I think we have a few already.
Thank you, Chrissy and Kristen. Yes, we'll take some questions right now. I have seen some come in throughout the presentation, so we'll definitely take some time to answer those. I also do want to mention that the content audit template that Chrissy shared during the presentation will be available towards people. We'll send a link out so everybody can download that. One of the questions that came up first was, what are some common content strategy mistakes? So are there stuff that you've noticed with different brands where they make these common mistakes, or are there even some mistakes that you yourselves as content strategists have made? So let's try that one.
All right, hi, this is Kristen. I have one that I see industry-wide, and then two that are more personal that I'll share. So industry-wide, I think there's a trend toward content strategy just really being overcomplicated, difficult to understand, and highly theoretical, versus just being useful and practical and doable. So I think, I don't know if anyone's familiar with Erica Hall's book, Just Enough Research, but we try to abide by just enough content strategy, do what we need, do what's going to be useful and helpful, and try to just get rid of that noise. Two other quick examples I'll share. So one mistake, using our established content strategy as guidance and inspiration, but then not pulling it back up to use it for governance, which is kind of what it's for. So one example of that is presenting copy out of context, not tying it back to the messaging strategy that we established. And so we've definitely learned from making that mistake, and we now are sure to present creative work in the context of the established content strategy to keep everyone anchored back. Lastly, not everyone shares our affinity for color-coded spreadsheets, which is shocking and appalling, I know. Sometimes we've erred on the side of over documentation. So a tip that we would offer is, synthesize, make it actionable, have all that backup, but really for the vast majority, they consider that an appendix versus something really exciting.
Another question that we have, are SEO and content strategy the same thing? So SEO, a lot of people talk about that. It's definitely an element of digital marketing. And content strategy and content marketing is also another element that we're seeing a lot of when we talk about digital marketing. So how are they the same, or how are they the different?
Well, fortunately, I'm a recovering SEO, so I at least have some context here. So I really view the two as working together, working hand in hand, but also being very separate entities. There's a lot of inputs, so something that we really take into consideration when determining what types of content to create, particularly on websites, is marketplace opportunity. And SEO plays a huge role in that. Like, you're able to do a lot of organic research, see what people are searching for from a keyword perspective, and that really is indicative of what's happening in that particular industry. So it's really an important input to what ultimately, what types of decisions that we make, and it definitely plays a role, but ultimately we're trying to look back at what that specific audience is looking for. I know that in my past working in SEO, I saw a lot of let's create content so that we can rank for this particular keyword. Whether it was maybe the most relevant piece of content or not wasn't totally factored in. Audience was not really considered. So I see them playing together for sure, and SEO is certainly an input to content strategy, but it's also, they're very separate worlds, so separate but related.
So obviously content strategy starts with identifying your needs, but sometimes that's easier said than done. So how would I identify the content needs of my organization?
Sure, go for it.
So identifying specific content needs for your organization. I think, again, a big piece of that is understanding who your audience is and the areas in which they're going to best interact with your type of business. So that would be a really good place to start. And then again, taking a look at what you have versus what you need, understanding from a gap perspective, how you can best serve your customers. If people really interact with your emails that you're sending them, that's a great place to really focus your efforts. If your blog is getting a lot of engagement, focus there. Kristen, do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, just one quick addition. Customer journey maps are extremely valuable, but a way to make them even more helpful and actionable is to pull out some specific user scenarios. For example, people who are coming to the site to validate that you actually know what you're talking about, or people who come to the site to know if you have a location near them. So really drilling into those specific scenarios and figuring out what are people doing to meet that need, and then doing a content layer on top of that. What do I have? And then it's an easy way to spot some gaps, like, oh, maybe I'm missing a store locator, which would be very basic. Maybe I'm addressing most of the awareness and consideration phase, but I'm really, really light on helping someone actually make a decision and get in touch with my organization. Adding that content layer over a specific user scenario has been pretty helpful for us in several projects.
So one question I want to make sure that we cover here, because they do a nice reference of identifying the grilled cheese mentioned that Chrissy had. So once you've identified your ideal content or the grilled cheese for your target audience, how do you get that content found? So maybe something for the recovering SEO.
Yeah. So that's really where SEO and PPC can really come into play, and also email marketing. So sharing that content with people in the appropriate places. Depending on the size of your business and relevancy of your business, SEO again SEO is more the long game. PPC is going to be more of that short game. So if you want to get some initial interest in your content, PPC is the way to go. So, you know, whether that's Google ads, Bing ads, social ads, again, just finding the most appropriate place for your audience, and then optimizing for SEO, so optimizing for organic search, making sure that that your site is technically sound and can be found by search engines. That's a whole other can of worms to open there. But yeah, so those are the, you know, two main places where you're gonna get that content found.
That's great tips and nice feedback for that. So another question. As a small team, we've seen and tested a lot of tools, but could you recommend a couple tools to keep content strategy in line, and what would those be? So Mark is part of a small team, and he's asking that question, but I think it's probably something that companies of all sizes probably struggle with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. Whether you're doing internal efforts or efforts for clients, it's always important to have a great toolkit to reference. So I'll pull out a couple of our staples. The first would be a measurement model. We have a pretty solid template and process for how we arrive at business objectives supported by measurable goals, and a clear path to evaluating success or failure against each one of those goals. So really the tool there is the model in its entirety, but really what it allows you to do is evaluate really specifically defined performance indicators against targets that will help you not only run new ideas through that filter, you know, will help or hurt against these objectives and goals that we've identified, but monitoring those targets and your actual performance on a regular basis. You know, there's just cold hard facts at that point. You can kind of set politics and opinions aside when you're looking at data. Another tool is the user journey and user scenario to really understand what your audience needs and expects, and to some degree what their other choices are. If you're not helping drive toward a decision or meeting an audience need, that's a great tool for saying, no, that's unnecessary or not going to be helpful to us. This isn't necessarily a tool, but it's a process called domain modeling, which can help keep your content strategy in line in the sense that it allows you to really just get all thoughts and ideas out on the board. That's really what a domain model is everything that could be relevant to your business or your property, get it all out there, and then just start organizing and prioritizing. And lastly, the content strategy statement that Chrissy shared a few slides back with the orange boxes, that's really a critical anchor. If everyone can get on the same page about, hey, what is our core strategy statement and what can we rally around, it's that tool that can help you prioritize content ideas, what channels you should be on. Really, that's a great tool to say yes, no, more or less.
Great. So I think what we'll do is we'll take one last question here, and it's a question around what you mentioned was a content audit. How do I get started with a content audit? You'll also be sharing a downloadable asset where it's the audit template. So maybe what a nice way to answer this would be is, are there a couple tips or tricks that people could use using that audit template to get started with their own content audits?
Yeah, so to start, so we'll be passing along this template to you. The first place that you want to start is using Screaming Frog. It's a tool that will crawl your site and pull every URL that is accessible on your site. So that's a really good place to start. It pulls some key information, page title, meta description, a lot of the SEO elements, and then again by URL. So taking a look at each specific page, it's kind of an arduous project. So depending on how large your site is, you might want to split it out into different sections. If your site is pretty large, maybe you want to focus on your highest traffic pages or just break it out by section. That's a really good place to start there. And then again, like we mentioned, just making sure that the criteria that you're selecting is the most relevant. So mapping out your content to a specific user journey, and also if you have multiple target audiences, mapping it out to the specific target audience. And then just pulling in different types of information. So if you have GA access and you're savvy in there, pulling in website traffic and page traffic specifically. Also if you have social data, if that's an interesting metric to you. So just identifying those specific metrics that are most useful. Do you have any other tips, Kristen?
I would just add that the inventory piece and a portion of the audit can be and should be largely automated. So tools like Screaming Frog and pulling in GA data and things like that in an automated way will save you lots and lots of sanity and time. The majority of the audit, though, is a manual and analytical process. So we found it really helpful to establish some validation for each of those more subjective fields so that everyone is inputting consistent responses, whether it's yes, no, somewhat, some consistent kind of vocabulary for how you're assessing and documenting your findings. And then always including an actionable column like, keep, kill, combine, or a notes field is really critical. And then once your data's in your audit is populated, you can manipulate it several different ways. Our favorite way to manipulate it is to kind of pull it out in a scorecard format. So kind of roll up the key metrics into always red, yellow, green conditional formatting, because how else do you make a decision, right?
Thank you. I think those are great tips to end on. So thank you all for your time today. And Chrissy and Kristen, thank you so much for presenting today's webinar. I know that I'm walking away having learned a handful of new tips and tricks for content strategy and content marketing. So thank you again for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.